the issues in this case is the fact that they had pre-existing health conditions before the motor vehicle crash. And that could have been from, the ankle injury, which I don't think is really related, but obviously the neck surgery, then the 2 motor vehicle crashes and the slip and fall. It appears that the last time you had any kind of treatment was about 2 years and 1 month between the last treatment and this motor vehicle crash. So my question is, how are you feeling 2 years before the motor vehicle crash with Dr. Baptiste? You're doing well.
A week or 2 after the surgery, I was feeling back to Dannette.
Okay. But I don't want to go that far back.
Okay.
Okay, and I appreciate that. But I only want to go far back as right after the last treatment that you had from the 2 car accidents and the slip and fall.
The 05.
Yes,
exactly. Okay.
Yeah. So the period of time I'm interested in is 25 months between that last treatment and this motor vehicle crash.
I felt fine. I was fine enough to do my job properly, to do crawl spaces and be up in the attics. And a lot of attics up here are not user-friendly, if you will. Got to do a lot of crawling as if you were in the crawl space. And I felt fine enough to do it. Proud with a smile on my face. If I was hurting, I wouldn't have a smile on my face. So I felt I was doing my job properly and happily.
Let's talk about when you crawl through a crawl space under a house or in an attic with a flashlight. What is it that you're looking for? What are you doing? What are you documenting? Why are you there?
I'm looking for anything that can get through a space of a dime. A mouse, raccoon, any kind of vermin or termites.
What are you looking for when you're looking for termites?
I'm looking for residual, actually feces.
So, are you required to go around all the edges of the attic?
Every edge of the attic, every edge of the living space. You have to go through every one of them and take the flashlight and look physically at everything. Every spider, if there's spider problems, if there's any kind of pest problems, that was my job to try and find it.
Okay, so 2 years out, you were doing fine. How about 2 months before this collision?
I was doing fine. I was becoming the best salesman that they had.
How about 2 weeks?
Amen.
2 minutes before the collision, how are you doing?
My heart was beating like a panther. 2 minutes before this because it seemed to last forever, like a half an hour.
Let me ask you 2 seconds. That would be when you realized you left the day.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But I was feeling fine up until then. I just was low on batteries. My juice in the battery was low.
When's your next series of injections with Dr. Hauser for the Botox?
I believe the 22nd, I think. 22nd or 23rd, I'm not quite sure. It's on my calendar.
Ms. Griffith, that's all the questions I have. I'm sure that Mr. Fisher has.
Okay, Ross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please support Mr. Powell. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ms. Griffith, let's first start off with the auto accident that we're here for today. Think about that. Each of these photographs of the vehicles involved in the accident, didn't you?
Correct.
Okay. Now this is a picture of your 1999 Cadillac Betsy 1.
Betsy 1.
All right. And did you take that at the scene of the accident?
I'm wondering why that car is up there. Is that his car in the corner?
It looks like it could be, yeah.
I don't know,
Right.
because there was no cars around me.
This is a picture of your car, isn't it?
Yes.
All right. Now, do you see any damage to the grill?
I can't.
Well, show me, please.
It's right. I know where it was.
Okay.
This,
Okay. All right, I see. So you think there's some property damage there to the grill?
well, it all is relative to the grill, the fan belt, the radiator, and the engine. When you get hit at that force, it's going to go back into everything. And that's like, these are built so well, that's why I get them. That's why I ride in them with my pre-existing.
Now, this Cadillac, Betsy 1, was the Cadillac that was involved in the 2004 rear-end accident when you rear-ended another vehicle, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And you had it repaired then, right?
It was repaired and it worked fine. I went to 5 to 7 appointments a day with Betsy.
Now, you don't see any damage to my client's rear bumper, do you?
I just see scratches,
Okay.
and that's a plastic bumper that's made to do what it does,
And
not show much damage.
you're not an accident reconstruction expert, are you?
No, sir.
You were asked about where you were in relation to my client's vehicle at the time of the accident, and you have a memory of that day. And is this a fair and accurate depiction of the accident scene?
That is the scene, yes.
Okay. Do you remember your deposition being taken before?
Check the form. It's probably across.
All right, I'll overrule the objection now, but make sure she has an opportunity to see the deposition and ask her the question, ask her if she recalls the question and response before you try to impeach her. I'd like counsel to know the page, line that you're referring to.
I'm looking at which deposition.
Yeah, it's the February the 16th, 2010 deposition.
That's what
I'm referring to Here, pause. When he is attempting to get off the median, how far away in the front of your car from the back of his vehicle, either in car lengths or feet, yards, however you can quantify it. Do you remember being asked that?
the objection, Your Honor.
Ask the question and ask her if she recalls her response. Let's do that.
Thank you.
When it was asked,
Objection?
Well, what he's going to do, ma'am, he's going to ask you if you recall this question and this response. So go ahead and ask her.
do you recall this question being asked of you? Page 76. When he is attempting to get off the median, how far away is the front of your car from the back of his vehicle, either in car lengths, feet, yards, however you can quantify it? Do you remember being asked that?
Not 100%.
Okay. Yeah, Bruce?
You may.
76.
76? Yeah.
show you your response, and could you please read the question again and then let us know what your
Which number?
right there.
17? Okay. 17, okay. When he is attempting to get off the median, how far away is the front of your car from the back of this vehicle in either car lengths, feet, yards, however you can quantify it?
And what was your answer?
I could not tell you.
Can you ask her to publish the rest of the answer?
Yeah, go ahead and read the rest of the response.
Oh.
I could not tell you. I wish I could, but I remember having no place to go so I could get out of this situation and avoid. I couldn't go anywhere. Okay? I felt stuck.
All right. So do you agree that at the time of your deposition back in 2010, you couldn't remember where your car was in relation to my client's vehicle?
I believe they were trying to get a specific out of me, like 10 feet, 12 feet, and I could not tell you exactly. That's why I answered the question now.
Okay. Well, you just answered the question today in court exactly.
Well, I was trying to envision it to help the jurors.
Now, you say that Mr. Baptiste, you saw him move his vehicle up onto the median?
Onto the street in front of the median. Where his rear end was up.
And you don't know how fast he moved backwards, do you?
No.
Okay.
All I know is the revving of the engines.
And you say you honked your horn?
I believe I honked it several times because I couldn't believe he wouldn't look out of one of three mirrors or hear me.
Now, when you got, following the impact, then my client, Dr. Baptiste, got out of the car and said he was sorry for backing into you.
Objection, relevance.
I'll overrule that objection. Go ahead.
I'm not sure how, it wasn't I'm sorry at first. It was, please don't call the police. This is what I recall. Please don't call the police. I just had surgery and I'm fine. You're fine. There's nothing wrong with your car. Don't call the police.
Now, let's think back to when you were in Indiana. You had your accident, the pedestrian accident, and you had the surgery to your neck. And prior to that, you had been an owner of a bar, is that correct?
Correct. My husband and I.
Right. Tremors?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you have this accident, and you come down to Sarasota.
Check to the form.
I'll overrule that objection. Go ahead.
After the accident, you come down to Sarasota, correct?
Actually, I'm not sure of the times. I believe the surgery was around February, March, and I didn't move down here until October
Of what year?
2001.
All right. And by May of 2002, you started treating with Dr. Dietz, the chiropractor, correct?
Yes, I wanted to check him out to see how I felt because I was very scared of anybody touching me.
All right. And And Dr. Dietz began chiropractic treatment on you for the accident that you had in Indiana, which and then subsequently involved the cervical fusion, correct?
No, Dr. Dietz, Dottie began treating me because the girl that hit me the day before Christmas in 2001 or 2002, I can't remember.
Okay.
But all I do know is it was Christmas Eve when she hit me, and then I believe Dr. Dietz started treating.
Well,
I'm not sure.
all right. Assume that the records are going to show that you treated with Dr. Dietz May the 1st, 2002.
I think you might, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he started treating you with a history of being hit while a pedestrian, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And at that time, you had headaches, cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral pain and stiffness, and shoulder pain on both sides.
I don't recall.
All right. And you also had some hip pain, didn't you?
I don't recall. That was so many years ago. I wish I could give you a proper answer.
Now, shortly after you started treating with Dr. Dietz, he performed what was called a chiropractic manipulation under anesthesia for your pains that you had from that pedestrian accident, correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
I can't really recall, sir.
And at that time, you had cervical segmental dysfunction, cervical myofasciitis, cervical myofascial pain syndrome with trigger point formation, thoracic segmental dysfunction, acute chronic trigger point formation, left shoulder chronic strain, left acromioclavicular chronic dislocation, subluxation chronic cephalgia, right hip segmental dysfunction. Doesn't sound like you're doing very well at that time, does it?
I'm not a doctor. I don't know what was put down.
All right. Now, how did that manipulation under anesthesia make you feel?
I loved it. I told him I would be his poster child because it helped me that much to be able to look out the back of my Cadillac.
All right. Now, you were involved in a motor vehicle accident April 24th, 2002, correct?
Don't recall that. I thought it was the day before Christmas.
And, well, you know, I see in the record, you treated with Dr. Regal February 10th, 2004. And later in the record, it does state that it's December 24th, 2002. So you were involved in a motor vehicle accident then, correct?
Correct. It was Christmas Eve.
All right. And by February the 10th, 2004, Dr. Regal was still treating you for that accident, correct?
I don't recall, sir.
And by February the 10th, 2004, Dr. Regal gave an impression as a result of the 2002 accident that you had worsened neck pain consistent with cervical strain, and post-cervical laminectomy syndrome. Do you recall that?
Once again, I just recall going to some doctors and getting better enough to work.
And the doctor, Dr. Regal, February the 10th, 2004, actually gave you a permanent impairment rating from that 2002 accident, correct?
If you say so.
continued to treat with Dr. Regal, and on October the 21st, 2004, Dr. Regal, you reported to Dr. Regal that you were involved in a September 27th, 2004 accident, correct?
If that was the year the hurricanes came by every weekend, then yes.
And that would be the accident that involved Betsy 1, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And she was prepared enough for me to go to work every day, once again.
And back in October 21st, 2004, Dr. Regal gave an impression as a result of the history that you gave him then, which included the December 24th, 2002 accident, that you had worsened neck pain and worsened low back pain, and also an onset of bilateral TMJ dysfunction. Remember that?
You are confusing me.
We're on October 21st, 2004, when you saw Dr. Graham Regal.
I can barely remember his name. I'm so sorry. Could not even tell you what he was. That was 10 years ago, I believe. If you're saying 04.
And then by the time we get to 2005, in April 2005, Dr. Regal was still treating you for the 2002 and 2004 accidents, wasn't he? All right. And at that time, he was treating you for pain in the low back that radiates down to your buttocks, and sometimes will go numb down to your toes. Do you recall that?
Whatever he did got me back on my feet to work. That's all I know.
And you were having chronic neck and shoulder pain that radiates down to your hands and fingers with numbness and tingling back then. Remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. And you had prescriptions of Lexapro and Lortab given to you at that time for those pains?
I cannot recall. I'm sorry.
In 2005, you had a slip and fall accident in which you went to the Doctor's Hospital of Sarasota, correct?
Once again, my brain is foggy on this. I'm having a hard time recalling all these specifics. I'm sorry.
And when you presented, you stated that you slipped and fell and twisted your neck, and you landed on your lumbar spine. Do you remember that?
I don't recall that.
Okay. And you had complained of also twisting the right foot with right foot pain. Do you recall that?
Did you say I landed on my neck?
No, ma'am. The record states that you landed on the lumbar spine and complains of also twisting the right foot with the right foot pain. Do you remember going to the hospital for that fall down incident, November 28, 2005?
No, sir.
And they gave you prescriptions of Lortab and Flexeril then.
Flexeril sounds familiar. Lortab sounds familiar. I couldn't tell you how much or what, but those two sound familiar. Also, Bexol for some reason.
Now, moving up in time to June the 9th, 2007, you were treating with Dr. Dietz And that would be after our accident, correct? Okay. And you told Dr. Deese that you were startled by the imminent impact and braced yourself and slammed on your brakes, attempting to avoid the accident. Do you recall telling him that? June the 9th, 2007, which is just a couple days after the accident as well, you presented to Doctors Hospital of Sarasota. You recall that? That would be after our accident.
That is, it sticks out of my mind's eye, yes, sir.
Okay. And you told them at that time when you were admitted that a truck backed into her in reverse, going about 15 miles per hour, and she developed cervical spine and lower back pain. Do you recall telling them that?
Absolutely not. Say that again, please.
Yes, sir. I understand. You stated that a truck backed into you in reverse, going about 15 miles per hour, and you developed cervical spine and lower back pain.
I would never say that. A truck did not, well, a truck was not involved at all, sir.
Okay. And they gave you an IV of Dilaudid at that time, correct?
I believe they interpreted or wrote down or mixed me up with somebody else in the emergency room and wrote that down, and I remember thinking, what is going on? Why would they say that? When I think they got me mixed up with somebody else who was in the emergency room and just wrote it down on my papers.
Okay, thank you. Now, you, after the accident, you treated with Dr. Herman, correct?
Yes.
And in September, well, it was September 24th, 2007 to be specific, you met with him and you were following up with him, and you told him that you'd been gone a week on a cruise. Do you recall that?
Yes, my son and I used to go on a yearly cruise.
All right. So you had gone on a cruise after this accident?
Correct.
And that would have been in September or August, somewhere around
It's
there?
actually on my birthday, September 17th.
Okay. And you take cruises around your birthday?
I did until that. That was my last cruise, sir. I could not even walk out of the port when they parked the ship to go see the town. That was like 4 or 5 football fields, and it kicked my biscuit. So I can't enjoy that anymore.
When you presented to Dr. Herman September 24th, 2007, you were having some cervical, thoracic, lumbar, paraspinal, upper, lower extremity tenderness in the muscle areas, correct?
Dave, could you repeat that, please?
Sure. You were reporting to Dr. Herman, and he found on physical examination that you had cervical, thoracic, lumbar, paraspinal, and upper and lower extremity tenderness in all those muscle groups.
We're talking the shoulders?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were sore in those areas,
And
correct?
my middle back,
Okay.
yes. And the lower buttocks.
And at that time, Dr. Herman thought that your diffuse cervical, thoracic, and lumbar pain was probably exacerbated somewhat by being on your cruise.
I couldn't tell you what the man thought.
Okay. And he asked you to keep going into physical therapy at that time, right?
Yes, I
Okay.
believe so. I can't, I wish I could recall properly for you.
Okay. working along with Dr. Herman, you also started seeing Dr. Creedy, correct?
No, I fired Dr. Herman, and I believe it was in November, and then I went to Dr. Prevey for help with my pain. I needed my pain managed, so I fired Dr. Eric Herman before I went to the other doctor on PI.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's because he didn't want to give you the shots that you wanted, correct?
Excuse me?
That you wanted to get shots and he didn't want to give you shots, is that correct?
Me wanting shots? No, I don't want shots. But except for now with Dr. Herman, Hauser, the doctor that's in the book of Who's Who does the Botox, those help me. I don't recall anything of what you're saying. Somebody refused to give me shots, so I quit them.
No, ma'am. I mean, you wanted to have them and he didn't think they were necessary. Do you remember that?
Dr. Who?
Dr. Herman.
I can't recall that. Oh, no, I can't recall. I'm sorry.
And Dr. Herman, by June the 8th, 2007, was telling you that you're making pretty good progress. Was that correct?
I didn't know Dr. Herman in June 8, 2007.
I'm sorry, October 23rd, 2007. I apologize.
I don't know the dates. I just know it was a plethora of doctors with workman's comp. And then he was assigned to the nurse who was assigned to me in my case, Gibbs, or whatever. That was workman's comp, and that was
And he explained to you at that point that it was important to keep up with your therapy and that you were going to be able to get back to full level of duty of work at some time.
He was very pissed off at me, very mad. And wrote that I was 100% better before I even got back to work, after the therapy that he had sent me to. He was very upset that I fired him. He was not managing my pain.
By November 20th, 2007, you reported to Dr. Herman that you have no ridiculous symptoms at that time, correct?
No, I told him I wouldn't allow him to treat a hair on my forearm, that he was the puppet with the nurse that was assigned to my case. How when did nurses be able to tell doctors how to treat me?
And at that time, you were telling Dr. Herman on November 20th, 2007, that overall you were getting better?
No, I told him he's not helping managing my pain. He is fired, and I'm going to seek a new doctor who I'm hoping can help manage my pain. I found myself in the hospital while he was trying to manage my pain. He couldn't because he was listening to a nurse. He didn't even see me.
And by November 20th, 2007, you were given an assessment by Dr. Herman that you had myofascial pain syndrome and cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spine improved. And he told you at that point you had made a tremendous recovery.
I was magically 100% better as soon as I fired him. But I was still going to his therapy appointments that he had scheduled out for 9 more or 6 more weeks. I can't recall. But I think that was a knee-jerk reaction because he was upset that I fired him. So you're 100% okay, go away.
At a certain point in time, you reported to Sarasota Memorial Hospital, specifically September 14th, 2011, and you reported to Sarasota Memorial Hospital then that you tripped and fell onto your lumbar spine, correct?
I can't recall. I do remember tripping, but I do not remember telling them I fell on my lumbar spine.
And they gave you an IV at the lot at that time, right?
I believe so.
Were you still treating with Dr. Griffith at that time?
I could not tell you that. 2011, I was either with Freebie or after him, Dr. James. I couldn't tell you when I started with Dr. James. I wish I could. Sorry.
You left Dr. Creevy's practice, correct?
Yeah.
And did he let you go, or did you want to leave him?
He let me go.
On August the 30th, 2011, and I apologize for getting it out of order here, but at that time, you presented to Sarasota Memorial Hospital, and you told them that you fell in the bathroom today, and you have chronic back pain, and you were dismissed from your pain management doctor about a month ago and had been out of your pain medication since that time. Do you remember that?
Vaccine, yes.
And you reported that you were having increased falls over the past week, and you attributed it to your lack of pain medications.
Say that again, please.
You reported that you were having increased falls over the past week, and you attributed it to the lack of pain medications.
I believe I was going through withdrawal symptoms. You can die from immediately stopping taking it. It was kind of a mess. I was on. But the doctor had me on, sir.
And at that time, from that fall in the bathroom, you stated that you slid down the wall and landed on your buttocks. Do you recall that?
Vaguely.
And you bumped your head on the wall. And they gave you, at that time, an IV of Dilaudid as well, correct?
Oh, with the doctor, but no, I don't know. They just come in and say, hi, how are you? And take their needle and put it in the IV. You feel better in a little bit.
On November 18th, 2011, you presented to Sarasota Memorial Hospital, and you told them at the emergency department that you were sitting in a wrought iron chair where her dogs are tied up, and it states that your dogs pulled the chair out from underneath you. Do you recall that?
Thanks.
And you told them that you landed on your right hip.
I don't remember. So,
You were having complaints of pain in your right pelvis and the right low back from that fall down. Being pulled off the chair by the dogs.
thank you.
And again, they gave you an IV of Dilaudid at that time, right?
Yeah, it does like this. It made my head burn. Top of my head.
Now, these fall downs that we've been going over from 2011 through 2011, those falls aren't due to the accident that we're here for, are they?
Say that again.
These fall downs are not due to the accident that we're here for.
I believe there's causation, yes.
And on July the 10th, 2012, you presented to Sarasota Memorial Hospital for acute narcotic withdrawal. Is that correct?
If you say so, I cannot recall these dates that you're throwing at me, I'm sorry. I just can't, I wish I could. Let's do it.
And at that time, when you presented due to drug withdrawal, you were telling them that you have prescriptions for the narcotics. You need to find a place to fill them.
Are you telling me or?
Do you remember telling them that?
Yes, because that was the truth. I had them, and there was a shortage. It was even in the Sarasota Herald Tribune about the shortage of pain medications for people like me that were on pain meds. And I had a prescription, but you couldn't get it filled anywhere in this town.
And you could get a prescription from Dr. James filled at Walgreens?
Right? They were all out of the prescriptions. Nobody could get them in this town. That's why there was a riot in the Herald, Sarasota Herald Tribune about it. I believe that was the same time, so.
Okay. And at that time, when you presented for narcotic withdrawal, they gave you some morphine to help you out, right?
I don't recall.
Now, you've started treating with a social worker?
Yes,
Okay. And is she helping you?
yes,
Okay, good. Her name is Virginia Wynn.
yes, sir.
All right. And you've been going to see her and
No.
she's helping you out with getting better through some cognitive behavioral therapy?
She comes to my house on Saturdays, or she'll call me. We do sessions via the phone sometimes, and she has helped me if it's. I feel like I have a friend that's coming to visit almost, if you will. And she's just asked me how I'm doing and things such as that. But the cognitive question, could you elaborate, please?
Well, she stated that you're receiving cognitive behavioral therapy and helping you develop with coping skills.
With coping skills, yes, or the stress and the worrying and the fear of being homeless.
Now, May 25th, 2013, she met with you, and at that time you told her that you got in another accident and your pain had increased. This was May the 25th, 2013. Do you recall that?
No, sir. Say that again, you threw me a left ball.
May the 25th, 2013, you were seeing Virginia Wynn, and you told her that you got in another accident and your pain has increased.
No, sir. Unless it was one of the, a fall that you're yeah, that way. I have not been in a vehicle accident since Mr. Baptiste hit me in '07. Vehicle.
Right. She said an accident, we don't know what kind, but it was an accident and it increased your pain, that's what you told me.
I don't know what she said. I don't know what we're referring to here, sir.
All right. Now, before our accident that we're here for, you were reporting to Dr. Dietz, and as far back as 2003, and going forward before our accident, treating with Dr. Dietz, you were showing him that you had massive involuntary muscle spasms in the neck, back, upper back, left and right shoulder, and acromioclavicular joints. Do you remember that?
That sounds like Greek to me, no.
All right. Do you remember going to Dr. Dietz back in 2003 and having involuntary muscle spasms in the neck and the shoulder?
Don't recall that. I recall Dr. Dietz and an MUA.
All right. Thank you. Now, you'd agree that the best way to determine what your earnings were from before the accident and after the accident would be through the Social Security earning records that are entered into evidence, right?
Explain that to me.
Wouldn't you agree that the Social Security earnings statement that's entered into evidence would be an accurate record of how much money you actually made over the years?
I feel they're wrong, but I don't have the energy to fight that too. All I know is the last check I received was for 1 week for $1,000.
Now, and you had worked with Diablo Stocks for a period of time in Fort Wayne, Indiana. How long did that job last?
That was my ex-husband's business, and all I did was make calls. I first do due diligence on the companies to make sure that they weren't just a shell company, that they were actually real companies. And then we would sell their advertising via the internet and over the 900,000 opt-ins that we accrued. So that's all I did was get past the donut eater, and she is a receptionist that gets paid anywhere from 30 to 70K to keep me away from the CEO or the president or the CFO of the company. And I would get through to get an appointment for my husband to talk to them afterwards. That's all I did was get my foot in the door and take over.
It's fair to say that you've had several jobs over the years prior to coming down here to Sarasota, correct?
Yes.
All right. And then you've had several jobs since you've been down here in the Sarasota area.
Very, very hard to find a real job here in Florida, period, that actually pays what they say they're going to.
And you attempted to find work after the accident that we're here
Yes,
for.
sir.
And you actually worked with Natural Awakening's Healthy Living magazine.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That was my ex-boss.
All right. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Correct?
Thank you, Ron. You tried to get work that you could do that would replace what Terminex did, right?
Absolutely not. I could not do what Terminex did. I was on phone sales. I was the advertising director.
Okay. But it's a lot different physically, you know?
Of course. I'm sitting at a desk versus going out and driving to 5 to 7 appointments.
And I guess it's just job you can stand up at your desk.
Yeah, I did that a lot, making appointments and such.
And if you need to take time off and go to the doctor's appointment, you could do that.
Correct, and I was working out of my ex-boss's new boss again, bedroom. We were working out of their homes. So it was a very lackadaisical type of environment, if you will. I even had to feed his dogs.
How come you're not still doing that?
I found out that I was given a bad check, and it got ugly from there. They never paid me my $750 Christmas bonus. They gave me a bad check, which bounced, and then I found out that he was a felon. I didn't want anything to do with him. And then I couldn't take him to small claims court because of the $4,800.
That's all right, we don't have to go into detail. Good. Now, when you set out your keys well before this car crash, but this was after your neck surgery, that's right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you kept palliative care going
Yes.
after the surgery. Did the palliative care that you had before this car crash help a lot?
A lot, or I wouldn't have been able to perform the jobs that I was doing, I believe.
Mr. Fisher asked you about P&J dysfunction, and shoulder problems, other things that are not related to this crash. You're not asking the jury to give you anything as a harm or loss of that.
No, sir.
The cruise that you talked about, was that the last cruise you've been on in your life?
Unfortunately, yeah.
You used to live down in the Islands.
That's where we visited his father, too. We usually take the Cozumel Jamaica cruise.
Let's go on to Dr. Herman. Who did Dr. Herman really work for?
A Zurich workman's comp company.
Mr. Lee said that after the motor vehicle crash with Dr. Baptiste, you came back to work at Terminix for a while.
Correct. I wanted my job, but this was not going to put me down. In my mind's eye, this was not going to stop me.
Do you remember the one day when he came and he looked at you and he said, "What are you doing here? You should be in bed."
Yeah.
How did you feel?
I told him I was fighting anything to stay here to keep my job.
Do you know what muscle spasms are?
Yeah.
The muscle spasms that Dr. Dees talked about in 2003, are they anything close to what you're experiencing now?
No, sir.
Can you explain the difference?
The difference is these are very violent. My neck now goes back to the right or to the middle out of nowhere. It's just a spasm that happens, and the other ones were very mild in contrast to these muscle spasms. They'll wake me up if I've been sleeping violently to where I believe somebody's shaking me. That's how physical they are.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Griffith. The jurors may have some questions.
Did you have any additional questions? No, I don't have any questions from any of the jurors. No. Okay, let me see the attorneys at the bench just a moment. And then you may set down the bill up a little. Okay, we are going to be able to get you out of here by before 12 o'clock for lunch, but we have just I want there 2 more witnesses we want to get through, and then we'll get some decent lunch out, okay?
ahead and call James Eubanks.
Okay, all right, sir, just call.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that a testimony about to give be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I am.
Police Court, Counsel.
You may begin.
Good afternoon. If you could possibly introduce yourself to the jury here.
Yes, I'm James Eubanks, live in Bradenton, Florida.
Okay. And how long have you lived in Bradenton?
Since 2005. Been in Sarasota since 99.
And what do you do for a living, Mr. Eubanks?
I am a catastrophic insurance adjuster. I also own a mobile app development company, and I'm a part-time musician.
All right. Well, this jury here is going to get, is being asked to find out all the harms and losses that arose after the crash that Ms. Dannette Griffith was in back in June 6, 2007. Are you okay to talk about that a little bit today?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and start just telling them when you first met Ms. Griffith?
I met her in 2001. My wife and I, which is now ex-wife, moved to the Bentry neighborhood where she lived in August of 2001, and met Dannette sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas of 2001.
All right, and tell us all a little bit about how your interaction with Dannette progressed over the next couple of years.
We became very good friends. Her and my wife became best friends. I spent a lot of time together on a regular basis until we moved out of that location in 2005 and then moved to Bradenton.
Okay. And how often did you interact with her between 2001 and 2005?
A few times a week, usually. I mean, when we lived in the neighborhood, it was probably 3 to 4 times a week. When we moved out of it, it's probably only once or twice a month. We went to the same church, and she lived close to that church, so we would stop many times on Sunday after church to see her and things.
Okay. And were you still seeing her pretty regularly before June 6, 2007?
No, once we moved to Bradenton, it was only a couple times a month that we'd see her.
Okay. But regularly, once or twice a month?
Yes.
Okay. And go ahead and give the jury an idea about some of the activities that you yourself saw Ms. Griffith before the crash. Yeah.
Pardon?
Before the crash, yeah. Give an idea of what she was like before the crash. So what activities did you see?
Very active. My wife and I had a motorcycle at that time too, and she had a small one. She'd be able to ride that, around the neighborhood and things. Went to the beach a lot. My wife and her liked to go dancing and things. So she was very active. Could do anything, pretty much. I wasn't even aware she really had any disability.
What kind of dancing?
Just freestyle dancing and clubs and things here in Sarasota.
Okay. And describe her personality.
Very upbeat, and she was in sales. That's what she pretty much did her whole life. So my life has always been about sales. So it's about being able to communicate with people, be upbeat, just be salesmen usually are not pessimistic type people.
All right. And would you describe her before June 6, 2007 as being more active or more of a laid-back sort of, lazy?
No, very active. We always, when we go over there, we'd always be out by the pool, being active, not sitting inside the house, anything. So she always loved the outdoors a lot. So many times we get together, a lot of things were outdoor type things that we do together.
And tell the jury about cookouts.
That would be by her pool. We would always, she has seating out there, and she'd always be there, or we'd go be over at our house, and just doing regular cookouts. She liked to entertain a lot.
All right. And
She was always a gracious entertainer, as they could say.
before June 6, 2007, had you ever seen her complain? Have you ever heard her complain about the fact that?
No, she didn't really complain about anything.
Had you ever seen her decline any kind of activity?
No, never.
Had you?
You're always able to do things. I mean, there was no restrictions. I didn't have any injuries. My wife didn't have any injuries. We all did the same kind of things constantly.
Okay. Okay, so let's kind of fast forward a little bit to after June 6, 2007. And do you remember the first time you talked to her after that?
Yeah, I was in a few days, a week or something of that nature when the accident happened.
What do you remember about that?
I know she was working for Terminex, and she was doing very well at it, was happy at it. Talked to me to people that she might know that I could refer her to, just, very aggressive going out and getting business. After the accident, she, kind of just went dormant. She couldn't work, she couldn't do anything. She would hear from her less and less, actually. She wouldn't get out.
Do you remember any specifics about what parts of her body were bothering her after June 6, 2007? Just describe it.
She was a pretty healthy looking girl. She wasn't skinny or anything. Slowly started noticing, she couldn't, definitely couldn't walk. That her gait just kept getting worse and worse. And, she would slump over, be twisted one particular way, and then, later on started seeing, some twitching going on, like nerves that just, jerk, and that's pretty much what her life started being like.
Okay. And why are you sure that this started on June 6, 2007, rather than a few months or afterwards?
Well, because it happened within a relatively short time. When I saw her the first time, after that, within a few days, to a week, I saw these things all starting to happen.
Okay.
So, kept contact with her a little, at least a couple times a month. She wasn't able to go to church anymore or anything, so, we'd stop over there after that. So.
Okay. Actually, I think you answered my question about the twitching. Had you ever seen her twitch before this accident of June 6, 2007?
No, never.
Did you ever see her grimace or anything like that before the June 6, 2007?
No, not that I recall. She would act like anybody else at normal at the beach, run, play frisbee, swim, jump through the water. Didn't see anything abnormal.
Okay. And the jury saw her walking up, getting in the chair, and saw her leave a second ago. Is this her behavior here? She's not in the room, so we can talk openly about her. Is her behavior, as you saw here, fairly consistent with the past few years, or has it gotten? Give the jury an idea of how
it seems progressively get worse. I even had to stay in my house for about 5 or 6 days, and just a few months back, because it was, I've got a really nice Tempur-Pedic bed, and I said, well, maybe if you slept in a better bed, it might be better for you. Have neck pillows, right neck pillows. We just see that she just could not move in the mornings. It was extremely difficult just to get started. It would take a couple hours for her just to get moving where she could loosen up enough to start moving. Trying to bend over to pick up something is a sight to be seen, actually. It's the way she contorts herself just to be able to get down and try to get something. It's not good.
All right. And did you ever get an impression as to whether or not she was just laying around? Was she trying to get better?
Well, she was trying to get help. It took a long time for her to seem to get the help. I'd always hear of, she couldn't get to this doctor, she couldn't see that doctor. And it didn't seem like things started getting better until she finally was able to get some on Social Security disability. And then, started seeing some improvements of where she was at before. But that's, I think they changed her medication some, that helped a little. But none of the symptoms went away. Everything was just pretty well severe.
Okay. When did you first notice her starting to have difficulty walking? Moving around?
Right away, after that accident. Ever since that accident, she's never been the same ever.
Have you ever seen her limp one time before this accident?
No, I didn't. I wasn't even aware she had. I knew she'd had a previous accident from years ago. She had some things done to her neck, but I never saw any results of that. I had a couple of whiplashes and the chiropractor when I was young and stuff, and still have some problems here and there. But so I understand how that kind of thing feels. But I put a chiropractor, and she's not much of a complainer. But over the course of time, when you just can't get the help, it just starts really getting depressing. So, she kind of kept in the house and would go to the doctors that she could go to. But just things didn't get better. It just kept getting worse.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, Ross.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Still is.
So you've known Ms. Griffith since approximately 2001?
Yes.
And you moved out of the neighborhood around 2005?
Yeah.
Okay. Did Ms. Griffith ever tell you about being involved in any other accidents than the accident that you were here for?
She had an accident. She had said she had an accident. Before this one, I knew she'd had an accident years ago. I think up in Indiana or something. That she had something done to her neck or something of that nature, but I didn't see any restrictions that she was experiencing from that.
The accident we're here for is the only one you know about.
What do you mean?
The accident that we're here for today is the only accident that you know about that involved Dannette Griffith.
No.
What other accident? The one up in Indiana?
Yeah, the one up in Indiana.
Okay, any
That's what
others?
we're talking about. No.
All right.
Yeah. You confused me a little.
I'm sorry. That's a bad question. You consider yourself a good friend?
Yes. Very good. friend.
And you've kept in good contact with her?
Yes.
And does she come down and stay with you?
I've had her come down and stay at the house a few times.
Okay.
And
And
brings it.
are you aware of her narcotic use?
Yes.
And thinking of the point in time of the accident of June the 6th, 2007, when did you notice this decline that you described where she could not walk, her gait was abnormal, she was twisted and twitching? When did you see that?
It just, I didn't see the twitching until maybe a month or two later. The walking was immediately, she was limping, just could barely, very restricted and, moving.
And did that kind of restricted movement, from your observations when you saw her, continue on until today?
Yes, they keep progressively kept getting worse.
So from the years 2006 all the way up until today, she's had that problem with walking?
Yes.
Have you noticed that she's had the problem from 2006 all the way until today with bending over?
Yes.
And the same question for
2007.
Okay, we'll make it 2007 for just the average daily living activities.
Yeah, it's just been night and day difference.
All right. 2010, same thing.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Any redirect?
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, sir, you may step in. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do is go ahead and take our lunch recess today. I'm going to give you till at least 1 o'clock. So if you leave your legal pads there in front of you, you're going to be in recess until 1. And remember, you can't discuss this case until it's time for deliberation. All right, ready to take? Okay, and who is the witness that you needed to prompt?
James Sokol.
Is he
William
now?
Sokol. He's here.
All right, go ahead and bring him in the courtroom and you can ask him some questions. All right, Mr. Sokol, if you'll come forward, you will just, have him hold that, raise your right hand and face the clerk, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that testimony about to give you the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and if you can find your way right around that corner there and have a seat with us. Yeah, go ahead and sit down, and defense counsel is going to have some questions.
Good afternoon or good morning. Hi. Please state your name.
William Sokol?
Mr. Sokol, where do you reside?
17716, Montauk Drive, Lewis, Florida, 33549.
And what is your occupation?
Accident reconstructions?
All right. Have you ever been qualified as an expert in court as an accident reconstructionist?
Yes, sir.
Okay, where?
Now, doing accident reconstruction. I've been doing it since May of last year.
Okay. Well, we aren't quite there yet.
Okay.
Have you been qualified in any other court?
No, this is the first.
Okay. And give me an idea of what your education is.
I graduated from University of South Florida with engineering and science background.
And what was the degree in?
Environmental science,
And what year was that?
1997.
And do you have a CD?
Yes, I did.
Have you provided it to me yet?
Yes, I did.
No, you didn't.
I have another one. I did give you guys a copy. Do another one.
All right. You received a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of South Florida in Environmental Science and Engineering?
Yes, sir.
All right. And your specialization after that was in what? Wastewater and water treatment?
Yes, sir.
All right. Have you taken any other courses at a post at a university setting?
No, I got to do my CEUs though. Every 2 years, I do have to do continuing education units in order to keep my license current.
Okay. License as what?
Water and wastewater.
Okay. So you hold specialized licenses in water and wastewater?
Yes, I do.
All right. And your background actually has been working for the government in some sort of wastewater treatment or water treatment testing capacity, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Have you had any education as taking accident reconstruction courses at a college level?
Not an actual college, but I did take for the area software and for the total station certification, which I also did in college. That I did do.
Now, the only bit of training that you've had then is through training to operate a software program?
Well, no, when I was in college, I did physics. I majored in engineering physics. So the physics of the accident is the same physics that you would apply.
Now, what was your major?
Environmental science.
You weren't a major in physics, were you?
Physics is a course. I took all the physics courses for engineering would take. I took physics 1, 2, 3, physics with calculus, physics with thermodynamics.
Okay. Now, as far as accident reconstruction, you have taken no classes in any university
Not the university.
for accident reconstruction specialty, correct?
I'm certified to use the software, and I'm certified to use all the equipment, but I didn't do it at the actual university, if that's your question.
Now, certified to use the equipment, you mean the equipment that you're using to create an animation?
Both the measurement equipment also. We use the total station, which is kind of like survey equipment, and it's used to take very precise measurements over distance and time. So you set up the survey machine, and I can shoot a point and tell you exactly how far it is from here to there, the elevation, the height, and then.
Okay. Now you don't have a degree in engineering, do you?
I do not.
And you've been an so-called accident reconstructionist for how long?
May of last year.
May of last year?
Yes, sir.
And that's after you took an online course for a computer animation software that you bought?
Well, I was doing it before then, but I was doing all the calculations by hand, using physics, just doing all the force, momentum, and the mass and velocity calculations by hand. Subsequent to that, I did buy the software, and I double-checked my math with the software math, so they're both accurate.
Okay. Now, the only training or education that you've had in accident reconstruction is through the Casal 360 software, correct?
It's the Aries 360 software.
Aries?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, actually, physics are the physics. So really, when I was in college, it's the same physics for force that you use for the accident. So really, I've had 4 years of physics, which is really what the accident reconstruction does. But the software I've only been using since May. That's the question.
All right. So you have an education from having a Bachelor of Science degree in environmental sciences, and you've taken some physics courses. Can you show the court what physics courses you've taken?
I've taken physics 1, physics 2, physics 3, and physics with thermodynamics, physics with calculus. All the physics classes you need to be an engineer, I've taken those classes.
And the CD is where?
It's right here. Want to get a deal?
So the extent of your experience in training, education, and as an accident reconstructionist is from taking a course for a crash reconstruction software certification from a commercial company, correct?
That's correct, but the physics are the same physics involved with the physics calculations of physics, so it's the same math.
And you've only been doing this for, what, 7 or 8 months?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you as an accident reconstructionist are being asked to calculate the forces of the impact for an accident, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you conducted the calculations, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, the analysis that you conducted for this case was going to be put into computer animation software, correct?
Correct. I did them first by hand, the calculations, and then I did them again with the computer software, and then I had the computer generate the accident according to the calculations and the readings that I took with the total station. That was actually the device to measure all the readings. I went to all the scenes.
All right, so you went, in order to determine your opinion, you went out to the scene of the accident.
That's correct.
And you listened to what Dannette Griffith told you about where her vehicle was, right?
That's correct.
And you relied on her statement to you about where her vehicle my client's vehicle.
That and the depositions of your client and Ms. Griffith, that's correct.
Okay. So that was your sole reliance on the distance was based on that.
No, I went out to the total station and I measured the distance from the curb to the car.
But she told you where her car was at that point, right?
That's correct.
All right. Now, you determined what you ultimately called the delta V for the case, right?
Correct.
Now, you state that you used calculations, but you didn't use a crush energy calculation, did you?
I have that here.
No. Now, the crush energy calculation was based on you looking at the property damage, correct?
It was based, I went to National Safety Institute, and I pulled out their numbers for the crush test that they do, what the government does, and I brought those, and I took those and matched those against the ones that I had, and I have those, that data.
But you determined no crush damage on the vehicle, correct?
Just the grill and the radiator was damaged on that vehicle.
You didn't look at the property damage estimate that showed no property damage, correct?
I looked at the pictures of the vehicle, physical pictures of the vehicle, that's what I went by.
And you don't know when that radiator was damaged.
Correct, I was told it happened at the accident, sir.
Right. So you have no scientific or numeric type of data from any institution that shows you about crush damage, forces of impact, which would cause crush damage on a radiator, a bumper, or the grill, do you?
The bumper I do.
Okay, the bumper.
Yes.
But there's no damage to the bumper, is there?
No, sir.
Okay. So in effect, what you've done is you've backed into your crush damage calculation without actually correctly determining what the crush damage was, because you have to rely on what the actual crush damage is before you can determine the delta V. And I would ask you, do you know of a authoritative treatise called Crush Energy and Accident Reconstruction?
Yes, sir.
All right.
But what you're saying, what you're asking me, the damage on the vehicle, I measured, in order to measure force, you need mass times velocity. I had the mass of the vehicles, I measured the distance on the vehicles, so I was able to calculate it regarding of what damage was done to the vehicle. I can still calculate the delta V on what I had. I needed the mass of the vehicle, which I had, and the distance which I measured, which is accurate from where I was told it was. So that's all scientifically proven.
Now, you didn't follow the calculation procedures in Crush Energy and Accident Reconstruction.
Okay, Mr. Judge, we're getting to start a minute. We're just disagreeing, or is there a question here?
Yeah, I'll sustain the objection. Let's formulate it as a question.
The Crush Energy calculation you did not determine according to the Crush Energy and Accident Reconstruction's treatise to determine the crush energy which would be used in the ultimate calculation for delta V. Now you made assumptions to get to that point. You assumed what the force of my client's vehicle would be without actually having any calculation or scientific way of determining that.
Objection. Is there a question in here? We're just.
Well, I'll overrule the objection. Go ahead. Continue to formulate your question.
Actually, if you look at, I just provided you with my math calculator that I've done by hand. If you look at step 5, it says I divided by 0.125 to modify for no compaction. So I already took into consideration that there was no vehicle compaction for crush factor on calculation number 5. I did that.
Well, the energy that you determined that came from my client's vehicle was assumption on your part based on what Ms. Griffith told you for the distance of the vehicle away from my client's vehicle, correct?
No, it was, I measured it, and I can tell you exactly how far it was. I measured, it was 28.46 feet from where the car started to the car impacted. I took that, after I measured that myself personally with the total station.
But how did you determine that distance?
By Ms. Griffin telling me where the car was done, but the curb wouldn't have moved. The client was on the curb, like he said, the median would not move. So I knew the median was a fixed position. And the car, if you're talking about where the car was, I placed that with the total station, and I measured that to be 28.46 feet.
Right. And that distance was based on what she told you?
That's correct.
And that as well was placed into your calculations, correct?
The distance, yes, sir.
All right. Now, I'd like you to look at page 258, and I'll give you a copy. Page 269, equation 82. Do you understand what this equation states?
Okay. And which one are you talking about now, sir? Which question?
It's
A1, A2, or A3?
A2.
Yeah. Yes, sir. That wouldn't apply. There wasn't a question. Yeah, that's a question.
Yeah, so you don't believe that equation applies?
Well, there was no crush damage on the vehicle. I compensated for that. And the axis of rotation, I have those all calculated out where X, Y, and Z would be at any given time in the center of the...
So you found no crush damage, but from finding no crush damage, you determined that there was a closing speed of my client's vehicle, which ultimately came in contact with the plaintiff's vehicle.
You do not need crush value in order to get mass times velocity. I'm calculating, I already knew the weight of the vehicle, I knew the distance of the vehicle. I had everything I needed to calculate velocity and the delta V. What you're doing is you're trying to compensate, that's mitigation of what actually, when it hits, it mitigates it. And that's...
I'm just asking about how you determined the closing speed.
I measured it, I measured the vehicle, and I had all the calculations I needed to do mass times velocity. And I showed you step by step. I can go over it if you'd like to. Step by step how I came to that.
Now, you've been doing this for 7 or 8 months,
Physics I've been doing 10 years.
but this is the first time that you've done it in an accident reconstruction case.
Actually, in corporate, I've done other accidents, but I've never gone
And if you place those what you calculate into this animated software, and it comes up with an animation which will show the movement of the vehicle based on your calculations, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Now, the report that you gave shows an interval from 8.825 seconds to 8.50 seconds that my client's car accelerates from rest to a speed of 19.99 miles per hour, correct?
I'll have a look at that one. And which interval are you looking at now, sir?
You have an interval from 8.825 seconds to 8.850 seconds. And these are being dumped out of the computer animation program. Right?
Yes, I have it right here.
All right. Now, and so you're saying that the Chrysler accelerates from rest to a speed of 19.99 miles per hour, and that 0.025 seconds. Is that correct?
No, do you have a copy of this? Yeah, on issue report?
No, I just want to ask you about.
That's incorrect what you're asking. It doesn't instantaneously go to 19 miles an hour. No. I have a breakdown second by second here of where the vehicle is each second from start to finish in the accident.
Let me ask, have you posed this witness yet?
Yes.
All right, well, this is almost, is this a proper deposition? Because if it's a proper, you need to ask him about his qualifications. It sounds like it's a deposition.
I apologize.
Because I have to give the court report and the clerk's a lunch break. We got the jurors coming back.
Do you have any other qualifications as an expert other than being trained on the computer software program that you intend to use for this trial, and your education as a Bachelor of Science of Environmental Engineering?
Well, I'm trained on a total station. I'm certified on a total station. I got a degree, and I did do the area software. That's my pretty much qualifications.
Well, Your Honor, I would.
Has he been certified to testify as an accident reconstruction?
No, he has not. Have you been certified to be an accident reconstructionist in the court of law?
I've only been certified by the area software.
Okay. All right. You can ask him about his qualifications.
In addition to your schooling, have you also been studying this for 8 months?
Yes.
So you've got physics 1, physics 2, physics 3, physics for calculus, thermodynamics, physics for thermodynamics. It goes back 10 years. You've been studying this for 8 months. You've been certified on Harris 360. By the way, tell if you don't want to speak with you for a second about Harris. What is that?
Harris 360 is a software that recreates, when you punch into it, you punch in the physical data of where you measure a point, and you can actually overlay physical from a surveying total station. You can bring in accurate data that's actually scientifically proven into here, and it puts it into a animation that you can see step by step.
Okay, why did you choose Harris 360?
It's the best software on the market right now.
Okay, by best, is it?
It's what the police departments use and the sheriff's department, and but when I took the class, every other student except for 2 were law enforcement officers, because this is what they use to reconstruct their accidents when they have fatalities.
Okay. Is Harris 360 accepted in the field?
It is, and I have documentation for that.
Okay. We don't actually need here. One more thing. Is biomechanics even offered at USF?
I wouldn't know.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
No.
All right. Thanks, sir. You may step down.
Thank you.
All right. I'll hear arguments. Sir, you can wait outside. I'll hear arguments.
Wait outside. We'll be right back.
Let me hear from the plaintiff.
Everybody's got the first trial. You know, we can't expect them to study more than 8 months and do what he's done. Plenty of police officers are experts daily, and I don't think many of them have taken this new physics and this new classes, so I'd be more than ever.
All right. He's not qualified to render an expert opinion. He's not certified under any body of certification that we've had hundreds of accident reconstruction experts testify. They at least have a minimum certification to testify. Based on what he's told me, he's taken some physics courses and he's taken a course online. I don't think that qualifies him to render an expert opinion. So I'm assuming you're objecting to his testimony.
Yes, I am.
So I'll sustain it. All right, we'll be back at 1:10.